What kind of evil leads to the senseless murder of a 13-year-old girl? A life full of promise, stolen in an instant, leaving behind unanswered questions and a family forever changed. This is the chilling and tragic story of Shannon Capers, whose case remains a haunting reminder of justice delayed. In the spring of 1997, Shannon Capers disappeared without a trace from her quiet Louisiana neighborhood. The 13-year-old was last seen walking down a road that led to the woods near the Mill Street apartments, a place that would later hold the key to her tragic fate. For 2 agonizing years, Shannon's family searched for answers, clinging to hope as days turned into months. Then, in May 1999, an anonymous call shattered the silence, revealing the location of Shannon's remains. The shocking details of what happened in those woods would unveil a story of betrayal, violence, and a desperate cry for justice that still echoes today. The late 1990s were a simpler time in the small Louisiana town Shannon called home. Known for its tight-knit community and unassuming charm, it was the kind of place where neighbors watched out for one another and children played freely in the streets. Shannon Capers was no exception, a bright, vivacious 13-year-old with dreams as big as her smile. She was beloved by her family and friends, a young girl with her whole life ahead of her. But beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful town, a dark and evil act was about to unfold. Her disappearance left an indelible scar on the community, transforming their quiet streets into the epicenter of a heartbreaking mystery. Shannon Capers was not just a name in the headlines. She was a lively, spirited 13-year-old girl who touched the hearts of everyone who knew her. Born and raised in a small Louisiana town, Shannon was known for her bright smile and an infectious personality that could light up any room. She was a typical teenager in many ways, balancing school, friends, and family. Her ambitions, though simple, reflected a girl with dreams far larger than the quiet town she called home. Family members often described her as kind-hearted, a girl who always put others before herself. Friends remember Shannon as the kind of person who could make you laugh even on your worst days. But for all her joy and charm, Shannon also carried the vulnerability of youth, a trait that made her trusting in a world that would eventually betray her. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Shannon showed no signs of distress. She went about her life as usual, unaware that danger was lurking just around the corner. Her family never imagined that a routine day would mark the last time they'd ever see her alive. For those who loved her, Shannon wasn't just a victim. She was a daughter, a friend, and a bright light extinguished far too soon. April 1997. It was an ordinary day in Shannon's world, a day that began like so many others in her small, unassuming town. Shannon was last seen walking along a road near the Mill Street apartments, a familiar area she'd traversed before. But this time, her journey would take an evil turn. Maurice Tate, an older man who had been romantically linked to Shannon, was a figure with a troubling past. On that fateful day, Tate asked an acquaintance, Roderick Russ, to relay a message to Shannon. The message? To meet him in the woods near the apartments. It wasn't an innocent invitation. According to later testimony, Tate had told Russ he intended to kill Shannon, a chilling admission that would take years to fully unravel. Shannon, unaware of the danger, walked toward those woods. The exact details of what happened next are pieced together from confessions and witness statements. According to Charnice McKnight, Maurice Tate's ex-girlfriend, Tate later confessed to luring Shannon into the woods. There, he claimed to have coerced her into a sexual encounter before choking her and finally ending her life with a gunshot to the head. The brutality of the act sent shockwaves through a community that struggled to reconcile such violence with the innocence of its streets. For 2 years, Shannon's family lived in a limbo of unanswered questions. Missing persons reports were filed, and searches were conducted, but Shannon's trail went cold almost immediately. The lack of evidence and witnesses left investigators with little to work with, and the community began to fear the worst. Then, in May 1999, an anonymous call changed everything. Charnice McKnight, Maurice Tate's ex-girlfriend, contacted authorities with chilling information. She directed them to a location near the Mill Street apartments, the very woods Shannon had been seen walking toward 2 years earlier. Acting on the tip, law enforcement arrived at the scene, where they discovered skeletal remains. The crime scene, though long cold, held critical evidence that corroborated Charney's account of what Maurice Tate had done. But with years having passed since Shannon's death, the journey to justice was far from straightforward. The community, shaken by the gruesome discovery, rallied around Shannon's family, demanding answers and accountability for the unspeakable act that had robbed them of a bright young soul. For 2 years after Shannon Capers disappeared, her case remained a mystery that left both law enforcement and her family grasping for answers. The investigation began almost immediately after her disappearance in April 1997. Detectives canvassed the area near the Mill Street apartments, questioning neighbors and residents about anything unusual they may have seen or heard. Search efforts focused on the nearby woods, the last place Shannon had been seen, but they yielded no immediate evidence. As the days turned into weeks, investigators struggled with a lack of physical evidence or credible leads. Without witnesses or surveillance footage, the case began to grow cold. Still, Shannon's family never gave up hope. They worked tirelessly to keep her name in the public eye, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. The turning point in the investigation came in May 1999, when the ex-girlfriend of Maurice Tate provided investigators with crucial information. She revealed that Tate had confessed to murdering Shannon and even described where her body could be found. Acting on this information, law enforcement returned to the woods near the Mill Street apartments. There, among the dense vegetation and undergrowth, they discovered skeletal remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Shannon Capers. The discovery reignited the investigation, giving detectives their first solid lead in over 2 years. Near the remains, investigators recovered several pieces of evidence that supported McKnight's claims, including bullet fragments and indications of a violent struggle. The crime scene, though long deteriorated, painted a grim picture of Shannon's final moments. It was now clear that this was no random disappearance, it was a calculated and brutal act of violence. With the discovery of Shannon's remains, investigators turned their attention to identifying her killer. The tip from Charney's McKnight pointed directly to Maurice Tate. Tate, a man in his mid-20s, had previously been romantically involved with Shannon despite the significant age difference. This relationship, described as inappropriate and exploitative, placed Tate squarely under scrutiny. Witness testimony revealed that Tate had expressed disturbing intentions before Shannon's disappearance. Roderick Russ, an acquaintance of Tate, admitted that Tate had asked him to deliver a message to Shannon on the day she went missing. Tate wanted Shannon to meet him in the woods, and he had confided to Russ that he planned to kill her. Despite this alarming admission, Russ did not report it to authorities at the time. As investigators delved deeper into Tate's background, they uncovered a pattern of manipulative and violent behavior. He had a history of volatile relationships and a reputation for controlling those around him. The motive for Shannon's murder appeared to stem from a toxic combination of possessiveness and anger. Tate's relationship with Shannon had likely ended or soured, and his inability to accept this rejection led to a horrifying escalation. Detectives also considered other potential suspects early in the investigation but quickly ruled them out. The evidence and testimonies overwhelmingly pointed to Tate as the primary suspect. His connections to Shannon and the crime scene were too significant to ignore. The key breakthrough in the case came from Charney's McKnight's detailed account of Tate's confession. McKnight, though initially anonymous, later came forward to testify about what Tate had told her. According to McKnight, Tate admitted to luring Shannon into the woods under the pretense of meeting, coercing her into a sexual act, and then choking her before shooting her in the head. Her testimony provided investigators with a clear timeline of events and confirmed the nature of the crime. McKnight's information not only led to the discovery of Shannon's remains but also corroborated other evidence found at the scene. Forensic experts matched the bullet fragments recovered from the crime scene to the weapon Tate was known to own. This link provided critical physical evidence to support the case against him. Despite these breakthroughs, the investigation faced significant challenges. The 2-year gap between Shannon's disappearance and the discovery of her remains meant that much of the physical evidence had deteriorated. Investigators relied heavily on witness testimony and circumstantial evidence to build their case. McKnight's cooperation was instrumental, But her credibility was also scrutinized given her prior relationship with Tate. Armed with McKnight's testimony and the forensic evidence, law enforcement moved to arrest Maurice Tate. The moment of his apprehension marked a significant turning point in the case. For Shannon's family, it was a bittersweet moment, a step closer to justice but a painful reminder of the loss they had endured. Tate's arrest sent shockwaves through the small Louisiana community. Many had known him either directly or indirectly, and were stunned by the allegations. While some expressed disbelief, others came forward with their own accounts of his troubling behavior, further solidifying the case against him. For law enforcement, the arrest was the culmination of years of effort and determination. Detectives who had worked tirelessly on the case felt a sense of relief but also knew that the road to justice was far from over. The arrest was only the beginning of a legal battle that would bring Shannon's story into the courtroom and expose the full extent of the crime. As the community processed the news, they rallied around Shannon's family, offering support and solidarity. For many, the case was a wake-up call about the dangers that could lurk even in the most familiar and seemingly safe environments. It was a sobering reminder that justice, though often delayed, could not be denied. The arrest of Maurice Tate marked the beginning of a new chapter in the search for justice for Shannon Capers. The case, which had haunted the small Louisiana town for over 2 years, would now be brought to trial, and the world would learn more about the horrifying details of Shannon's murder. Tate's trial commenced in 2001, attracting significant attention due to the gruesome nature of the crime and the involvement of the victim's young age. The prosecution was determined to hold Tate accountable for the brutal killing of Shannon, while the defense sought to undermine the case, challenging the evidence and witness testimonies. The prosecution's strategy was clear. They aimed to present a strong case based on the physical evidence recovered from the crime scene, as well as the crucial testimony from Charnese McKnight. McKnight's account of Tate's confession was central to the prosecution's case. She testified that Tate had openly admitted to strangling Shannon and then shooting her in the head. Her testimony painted a chilling picture of premeditation, a deliberate plan to kill Shannon for reasons tied to control and revenge. Additionally, the prosecution relied on forensic evidence to support their case. Bullet fragments recovered from the crime scene were linked to a weapon owned by Tate, further establishing his involvement in the murder. The skeletal remains of Shannon, though weathered by time, also provided key details about the manner of death. Medical experts confirmed that Shannon had been shot in the head at close range, corroborating McKnight's testimony. Despite this damning evidence, the defense team fought vigorously to challenge the prosecution's case. They sought to discredit McKnight's testimony, arguing that she had a motive to lie, her relationship with Tate had ended bitterly, and she may have had personal animosity toward him. The defense also raised questions about the reliability of the forensic evidence, pointing out the potential for contamination given the 2-year gap between Shannon's disappearance and the discovery of her remains. The defense attempted to create doubt in the minds of the jury, suggesting that Tate might not have been the sole person responsible for Shannon's death. They hinted at the possibility that someone else could have been involved, though no concrete evidence was presented to support this theory. The trial was full of tense moments and dramatic revelations. One of the most significant turning points occurred when Roderick Russ, the acquaintance who had been asked by Tate to deliver the message to Shannon on the day of her disappearance, took the stand. His testimony was crucial in linking Tate directly to the crime. Russ recalled Tate's disturbing admission that he planned to kill Shannon, an assertion that had remained hidden until now. His testimony confirmed that Tate's intentions were clear from the very beginning, adding weight to the prosecution's argument that this was no spur-of-the-moment crime, but one that was premeditated. Another key moment came when the forensic experts took the stand. They explained how they had matched the bullet fragments found at the crime scene to a weapon that Tate had been known to possess. This was a powerful piece of evidence that tied Tate directly to the murder. The defense's attempts to cast doubt on the forensic evidence were unsuccessful, as the experts provided clear and convincing testimony that the evidence supported the prosecution's theory of the case. Perhaps one of the most emotional moments of the trial came when Shannon's mother, seated in the courtroom, testified about her daughter's life and the lasting impact of her loss. Her words brought a human element to the trial that resonated with the jury. She described Shannon as a bright, loving, and vibrant girl whose life was tragically cut short. It was a poignant reminder of what had been lost and what could never be regained. As the trial reached its conclusion, the jury deliberated on the evidence presented to them. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the families of both the victim and the accused anxiously awaited the outcome. For Shannon's family, the hope was that justice would finally be served. For Tate, this trial was his chance to avoid responsibility for the crime, but the mounting evidence and testimony painted a picture of guilt that was difficult to ignore. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Maurice Tate was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Shannon Capers. The verdict was met with mixed emotions. For Shannon's family, there was a sense of relief and validation. Finally, the man who had stolen their daughter's life was being held accountable. But there was also sorrow, knowing that no verdict could bring Shannon back. Tate, on the other hand, showed little emotion as the verdict was read. His legal team had fought for his acquittal, but in the end, the evidence against him was insurmountable. As the jury returned their decision, there was no doubt that the case had taken a significant toll on all involved. While Tate faced the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, the real tragedy remained the life of Shannon Capers, a young girl whose future had been violently stolen from her. The aftermath of the trial was felt far beyond the courtroom. Shannon Capers' death and the ensuing trial had a profound impact on her family, her community, and the legal system. For Shannon's family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, but it did little to ease the pain of their loss. Shannon's mother spoke out after the trial, expressing that while justice had been served, there would always be an emptiness in their lives. She thanked those who had supported her throughout the ordeal but admitted that nothing could fill the void left by her daughter's death. The small Louisiana community, once shaken by the tragedy, now rallied around Shannon's family. The case served as a stark reminder of the dangers that could lurk in seemingly safe places and brought to light the importance of vigilance in protecting vulnerable children. The neighborhood near the Mill Street apartments, where Shannon had once lived, became a place where people frequently gathered to honor her memory. For law enforcement, the case represented both a victory and a cautionary tale. The tireless work of the detectives who had worked on the case was commended, but the emotional toll of investigating such a heinous crime was not lost on them. The case became a symbol of the difficulty and determination required in solving violent crimes. On a larger scale, the Shannon Capers case drew attention to issues surrounding child safety and the importance of raising awareness about the dangers posed by individuals who prey on vulnerable minors. There were calls for stronger measures to protect children, particularly in cases involving relationships with significant age differences. Shannon's tragic death, along with the details revealed during the trial, ignited a broader conversation about how society can better protect young people from predators. As we come to the end of this tragic and haunting story, we are left to reflect on the deep and painful lessons learned from the case of Shannon Capers. The investigation, trial, and aftermath serve as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk in the most unexpected places, often from individuals we might least suspect. This case brings into sharp focus the vulnerabilities that young people, particularly girls, can face, and the tragic consequences that can result from abuse, manipulation, and violence. Shannon Capers, a 13-year-old girl with a bright future, had her life stolen from her, cut short in the most violent and senseless way imaginable. For her family, the grief is unimaginable, a pain that no verdict, no arrest, and no sentence could ever fully alleviate. Shannon's mother, despite the legal victory, has said time and again that nothing could bring her daughter back. The words of a grieving mother carry the weight of a loss that is beyond measure, one that no legal process can repair. Yet, it is through this painful experience that we are reminded of the need for vigilance and awareness in our communities. The case of Shannon Capers is also a reminder of the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable tragedy. Throughout the investigation and trial, there were those who refused to give up, who continued to seek the truth, even when the odds seemed stacked against them. Law enforcement, despite the emotional toll of the case, persevered in bringing justice to Shannon. Charnice McKnight, who came forward with the crucial information, despite her own complicated past with Tate, demonstrated the importance of speaking out, even when it might be difficult or uncomfortable. Her courage allowed the truth to come to light, and it was her testimony that ultimately led to Tate's conviction. There are also questions raised by this case, questions that linger long after the verdict. How can we, as a society, better protect children from predatory behavior, especially from those who might hold a position of trust or influence in their lives? What more can be done to prevent this type of violence from happening in the first place? Could the tragic fate of Shannon Capers have been avoided if the warning signs had been noticed sooner? Could society have done more to intervene in her relationship with Tate, a man nearly twice her age, before it escalated to violence? These are not easy questions, and they don't come with easy answers. But they are questions we must continue to ask, because they speak to a broader issue that affects not just Shannon's story, but the stories of many others who may not have the same opportunity to find justice. Another theme that emerges from this case is the importance of justice. Though Maurice Tate was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, justice in this case will never be complete. It will never bring back Shannon, nor will it undo the profound hurt experienced by her family. In cases like this, justice is not just about punishment. It's about giving the victims and their families the closure they so desperately need, the recognition of their loss, and the hope that others will learn from it. As we conclude this story in the life of Shannon Capers, we are left with a haunting question. How many other children are out there who are silently suffering, who may not have the voice to speak up, or who may not have the chance to find justice? How can we protect the vulnerable, and how can we ensure that those who commit such heinous acts face the consequences of their actions? We must never forget the price of silence, the importance of speaking out, and the responsibility we all share in safeguarding the most vulnerable members of our communities. Shannon Capers' story is a tragic reminder of the consequences of violence and manipulation, but it is also a call to action, a call for greater vigilance, for empathy, and for change. Thank you for joining us in remembering the life of Shannon Capers. If you are a parent, a teacher, or just someone who cares, take the time to reach out, to listen, and to create a safer world for children everywhere. Together, we can make sure that Shannon's tragic story leads to positive change, and that no more lives are lost in such senseless violence. If you or someone you know has been affected by similar issues or is in need of support, please consider reaching out to organizations that help victims of crime and those facing abuse. No one should ever have to face such pain alone.